Cinema Classics is brought to you by the Gateway Film Center, 1550 North High Street, Columbus, Ohio. For their details and showtimes online at gatewayfilmcenter.com.
The award-winning Cinema Classics is produced by John DeSando and Johnny DiLoretto. Listen to the shows online at WCBE.org and like us on Facebook. I'm Johnny DiLoretto.
I'm John DeSando.
This is Cinema Classics.
Yep.
We're at the Gateway Film Center.
We are.
And what are we talking about?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, you and I visited Upper Arlington High School, very posh in Columbus, Ohio, public school.
Lots of smart kids over there.
Oh, Ricky Santer's film class. I would have loved to have had a class like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, they needed some amusement, so they invited us to talk to them, and we very smartly opened up with a discussion of the auteur theory.
Well, let's get this straight. They're studying the auteur theory,
It's
and
true.
then we're asking our opinions about it. For those of you in the audience who don't know what the auteur theory is, in a nutshell, it's the idea that the director is the artist behind a film.
Yeah, you see the art, you see the director's signature on that film. Probably best example would be Alfred Hitchcock.
Hitchcock, Spielberg, Scorsese,
Oh, right.
Wes Anderson. People who, when you're watching the film, you sort of know instantly who you're looking at. Just like you would know a Picasso, or you would know a Hemingway novel.
And recently, for instance, Richard Linklater's Boyhood is as much identified with him as director as the concept of his film.
You know, the auteur theory isn't quite as easily packed away as all that. Just because, you know, there are auteurs who you might not necessarily recognize their signature on a film right away. These are people who work, you know, I try to think of one that's a little less...
Well, I do. I have the classic one you and I have talked about.
Yeah. The classic one is Michael Curtiz.
Correct.
Who is a director who worked on many different types of
For
films.
Warner Brothers.
In the classical Hollywood period.
Right.
Westerns, dramas, tearjerkers.
Most notably, Casablanca.
Casablanca, romances, musicals.
Musicals, Yankee Doodle Dandy.
The question is, because this guy was such a journeyman, did he leave an imprint on those movies? I've always said, you know, and I would have to go back and look at them, but I bet, because they're also entertaining, there has to be, I'm betting, there has to be a through line, something that he's doing, some sort of rhythm or pacing, some sort of direction of the performances that he is doing that makes all of those movies so entertaining. He's probably the guy most responsible for directing more commercially successful and or just crowd-pleasing movies than any other person. So there has to be something there. It's just hard to articulate because it happens across so many different genres.
Yeah, and we'll always be debating this about Curtiz, but to me, what it says is that there are probably more Warner Brother films than they are his films, which indicates to me he may not be able to handle the auteur.
But that is where the auteur theory has its roots. Is that the French New Wave guys, Jean-Luc Godard, Francois Truffaut, all the people, Andrew Sarris at Cahiers du Cinéma, they were looking at They discovered the auteur theory by looking at studio-produced movies. Their theory was that despite these movies being cranked out sort of factory style, that still directorial voices and visions were coming through.
Wow.
So they would see, you know, in the works of John Ford, themes of country, family, loyalty, etc.
And isn't that's the very point? We were masters, Americans, masters of the genres. Westerns, musicals, thrillers, so on. And they loved it. The French critics and Sarris and others loved that idea that we had it because they didn't see it limiting.
Right.
They saw it as expansive. Here's a chance for you to play around with something where you know the formula, but within that you could make some very creative decisions.
Right.
You're exactly right.
Yeah, the permutations within a genre are endless.
Yeah. And
I mean, look, you know, I know we say the Western has pretty much come to an end, but you can still toy around with those those tropes to differing, results, and obviously culminating in something like Unforgiven, which seems to be a commentary on the entire genre, and not in addition to Clint Eastwood's role in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other interesting thing about the auteur theory is somebody like Wes Anderson, who exerts a really sort of intense control over his films, and the end result being something unmistakably Wes Andersonian. This often kind of elicits two different types of responses. The kind of response where somebody's like, "Oh, I'm sick of this guy. It's yet another.
Right.
It's
Quirky.
yet another quirky, eccentric pop-up book of a movie." But then there are other people like myself, I think you're among them, who delight in his unique voice. There is no other voice like it. Think about the Grand Budapest Hotel as a comedy, which it is, and then name 10 other recent comedies. The Grand Budapest Hotel is unlike any other comedy like that, and that is refreshing. That here's a man working in a genre that has been reduced today to Will Ferrellian. How's that pronounced? Will Ferrellian
like
sort of, a gross out humor, and
I think similarly, maybe less well known, Paul Thomas Anderson, another
yeah.
Anderson, has that quality. If you take There Will Be Blood, Inherent Vice, take a look at the variety of that, but still the darkness of the two.
Punch Drunk Love.
Punch Drunk Love, a completely different, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Each one is different, and yet you do get this sense that it's Paul Thomas Anderson. This sense, there's a sort of quietness to his movies. It's almost like they are taking place in our world, but a slightly different version of our world. They're weirdly unpopulated. You know what I mean? Like there's this
They're strange
disparity
and
to it, yeah.
I know.
But it feels like you're looking at people behaving in sometimes recognizable ways, and yet they seem to be operating in a vaguely unrecognizable world. And this is the first time I've ever tried to articulate what it is about Paul Thomas Anderson, but
I think his world is in a different way strange.
Mm-hmm.
The two Andersons have very strange.
Oh, yeah.
Now, one more normal, and that we've talked about many times, and you kind of passed over, Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
I think you could apply auteur to him, but I'm wondering why.
Well, I think the reason is being a Clint Eastwood expert.
Yeah. All right.
Clint Eastwood was dismissed early on in his career as just a sort of, limited actor action hero. And I think Clint Eastwood, having worked with Don Siegel and having worked with Sergio Leone, two great directors, he picked up a lot and caught the bug. And I think he kind of undertook directing early on in his career in the early 70s, as a way of just kind of controlling his product.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think he began to grow as a director. I mean, by the time you get to 1976 in The Outlaw Josie Wales, he was unhappy with what Philip Kaufman was doing with the movie, fired him, and overtook directing that movie. That, I think, is a great work of art, and I think that's where you begin to see Clint Eastwood emerge as an auteur, because in the 80s he starts doing different things like Bird, White Hunter, Blackheart.
If you take even some bad movies of his, Jersey Boys, for instance.
Yeah.
Here's a director largely thought of as a tough guy director who loves guns.
Mm-hmm.
An American Sniper, confirming that people say he does, and then Unforgiven. Take a look at that, and then look at Jersey Boys. But yet, how many people know that he's an accomplished musician? That is, Eastwood is.
Right.
And that he, in fact, scores some of his own movies.
Sure.
But here he is, Jersey Boys, a musical.
I didn't see it. Was it good?
Okay. I enjoyed it. Most people did not.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, except I thought it was astonishing that this dude could take himself right into that. But then I realized he's really a music man as well as anything else.
And now, you're talking about late era Clint Eastwood, post you know, post-$1 million baby Eastwood, who you have to say that a lot of these movies are sort of just by the numbers. I don't think he's putting a lot of work into them. However, I will say that at his peak as a director, from let's say 76 through, you know, peaking with Unforgiven in 92, I think you're looking at a guy, an actor who undertook directing as a sort of necessity, but then grew into an artist.
Yeah, and I think those thematically, like Unforgiven and Sniper, which seem to work very well with him, are ones where you could apply that auteur theory easily. The others that you've talked about, where he does his journeyman stuff, is Michael Curtiz stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
He does it well. According to me, he does it well. But there's nothing distinctive about it. Where I think with the auteur theory, we need to say that's an Eastwood movie.
Yeah, and you know what? Before we totally lose track of this, we keep thinking of auteurs as being people who leave a stylistic signature.
Yeah.
And we're not talking necessarily about theme. Thematic
is
just equally as important. I mean, Woody Allen, probably the best known American auteur, still working today, still working through those themes, romantic themes, disillusion of love, you know, neuroses, these things he keeps working through over and over again. Like you said about genre, you know, you can take genre and then switch up the tropes a bit to get a different result each time. That's what Woody Allen has been doing for 40 years.
But you know, you're right. Woody is heavier on theme than he is on style. And I think those who talk about auteur theory start with style.
Yeah.
Because, as we were talking about, the genre has what appear to be has some limitations with it. But they get in there and they break open the limitations.
Yeah.
And so style eventually seems to dominate. But I'm with you. Theme to me is very much important.
Well, think of it like, okay, Spielberg is probably today's Michael Curtiz, maybe, with a bit more sort of personal touch.
Oh yeah, I think
But somebody like Scorsese, I think you have to look at equally in terms of style and technique and thematic exploration.
You're right.
Right?
Oh yeah. Well, we've had some great examples. Auteur, which you could translate into author,
right?
Or somebody with the signature.
It's more fun to say auteur.